The iron bar slammed down with brutal force. Robert Warkey didn't even have a chance. On June 20th, 1929, in the laundry room of Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary, a guy who called himself the spirit of meanness itself finally kept his word. Carl Panzram had told the warden when he got there, "I'll kill the first guy who messes with me." Warkey, the laundry foreman who loved pushing prisoners around, ignored every warning. He pushed the wrong dude one too many times. When the guards found Warkey's body, his skull was totally smashed. Standing over him was inmate number 31614, Carl Panzram, just chilling, waiting for whatever came next. This wasn't his first kill by his count, it was his 21st. But what made this one stand out wasn't the violence. Panzram was a pro at that. What made it different was that he wanted to die for it. When the authorities offered legal appeals and activists tried to save him, Panzram's reply was ice cold. "The only thanks you and your kind will ever get from me is that I wish you all had one neck and my hands were on it." Before we dig into one of America's darkest criminal minds, hit that subscribe button and tap the notification bell. Carl Panzram's story doesn't start with blood, but with a baby's cry on a Minnesota farm. June 28, 1891, Jan and Matilda Panzram, immigrants from East Prussia, welcomed their sixth kid. They named him Charles, but he'd later go by Carl. Nobody looking at that newborn could have guessed they were seeing the start of one of America's most savage serial killers. The Panzram farm near East Grand Forks was no place for dreams. Jan and Matilda ran their home like a prison camp. 7 kids worked the fields from sunrise to sunset, and when truancy laws forced them to school during the day, their parents had them slaving in the fields all night. Carl later said he got maybe 2 hours of sleep before school. Punishments for any slip-up meant getting chained up or starved for days. By age 5, Carl already felt like an outsider. He'd later write that other kids didn't like him, and he didn't care for them either. He was lying and stealing before he could even tie his shoes. The real shift came at 7 when his dad bailed on the family without a word, leaving Matilda to raise 7 kids on a failing farm. Around then, Carl got a bad skull infection that needed surgery. They did it at home, which made it worse. By the time he got to a hospital, the damage might have already been done. Doctors couldn't say if the infection or botched surgery caused brain damage, but the timing lined up. After that, Carl's behavior got wilder and more violent. One by one, his older brothers ditched the farm, and the family fell apart. In 1905, his stepbrother Louis drowned working as a lumberjack. Carl was basically left alone with a mom who saw him as a burden and free labor. The first hints of Carl's future showed up when he was just 8. In 1899, he got arrested for being drunk and disorderly at 8 years old. 4 years later, at 12, he was nabbed again for being drunk and incorrigible. That same year, he pulled off his first big theft, swiping cake, apples, and a revolver from a neighbor's house. In October 1903, Matilda made a call that changed Carl forever. She sent her 12-year-old son to the Minnesota State Training School, supposedly a reform school for troubled boys. What happened there crushed whatever good might have been left in him. The Minnesota State Training School was a nightmare dressed up as rehab. Carl later wrote that staff beat, tortured, and raped the kids in a room they called the paint shop because boys left it covered in their own blood and bruises. The abuse was relentless and systematic. Carl's real criminal education kicked off in 1906 when he got busted for burglary in Butte, Montana. He was sentenced to a year at the Montana State Reform School in Miles City. If Minnesota was bad, Montana was hell. The guards were nastier, the conditions harsher, and Carl learned one clear lesson: the strong prey on the weak, and he was going to be strong. When a guard named Bushart punished him for some small thing, Carl grabbed a wooden board and beat the guy so bad he was in critical condition. For that, Carl got thrown into solitary, but he didn't care. He'd proven he could dish out worse than he took. In 1907, Carl and another inmate, James Benson, broke out of the Montana State Reform School. They went on a week-long crime spree across Montana, robbing, burglarizing, and burning stuff down. Carl had a special hatred for churches and torched several during the spree. When asked why, He said he despised anything that stood for goodness or hope. After splitting from Benson, Carl made a move that gave him access to weapons and training that made him even deadlier. Drunk in a hell in a saloon, he joined the U.S. Army. They sent him to the 6th Infantry at Fort William Henry Harrison. But Carl was a terrible soldier. He ignored orders, stole supplies, and made everyone's life miserable. The Army court-martialed him for stealing $88.24 worth of supplies. A big deal in 1907. He served his sentence at the United States Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, from April 1908 to August 1910. Carl later wrote that if he was a rotten egg before Leavenworth, that place killed any trace of decency in him. The guards there were brutal, even for early 20th century military justice. Carl was beaten, starved, and put through punishments that would be called torture today. Instead of breaking him, it taught him new ways to be cruel. He studied the guards' methods, learned their tricks, and swore he'd use them on innocent people someday. When Carl got out in August 1910 with a dishonorable discharge, he'd gone from a violent teen to something like a human weapon. He was 20, had spent most of his life locked up, and learned that violence wasn't just okay, it was the best way to get what he wanted. After Leavenworth, Carl kicked off an 18-year crime spree. His routine was simple: steal everything he could, hurt anyone in his way, and vanish before the cops could catch him. But petty theft wasn't enough. Carl found he enjoyed rape almost as much as robbery. He started targeting men he'd robbed, forcing them into sexual assault before leaving them beaten and humiliated. His strength, built from years of prison labor, made him unstoppable to most. From 1910 to 1920, Carl was in and out of jails across the American West and Southwest California, Texas, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, Connecticut, New York. Every stint behind bars meant more violence against guards, escape attempts, and brutal payback from the system. But jail also gave him time to think about murder. He later wrote that he spent hours planning not just single killings, but mass slaughters, poisoning water supplies, sinking ships, even starting wars. These weren't just daydreams. He was working out detailed plans. In 1915, while doing time at Oregon State Penitentiary as Jeff Baldwin, Carl got his first taste of murder. He helped an inmate named Otto Hooker escape, and during his run, Hooker killed the prison superintendent, Harry Minto. Carl didn't pull the trigger, but he made it happen. And the thrill of being tied to a killing lit something in him that robbery never could. Carl escaped Oregon State Penitentiary twice, once by sawing through his cell bars. Each escape made him sharper, more confident. By 1918, after his second Oregon escape, he was one of America's most wanted fugitives. Using the alias John O'Leary, Carl traveled the country and even overseas, working on ships, sailing to Panama and Europe, and spending time in Peru at copper mines. But everywhere he went, he left a trail of theft, assault, and more murder. The year 1920 was when Carl Panzram went from violent crook to full-on serial killer. After pulling off a jewelry store heist in Bridgeport, Connecticut, he had $1,500 in cash, enough to fund the dark fantasies he'd been cooking up for years. But first, he had a score to settle. He never forgot his brutal time at Fort Leavenworth, especially the guy who signed off on his sentence, William Howard Taft, then Secretary of War, now former president. On September 16, 1920, Carl broke into Taft's mansion in New Haven, Connecticut, stealing jewelry and bonds. But the real prize was Taft's personal Colt M19 .1.45 caliber handgun. Carl said robbing Taft felt better than all his other crimes combined. It wasn't just theft. It was revenge against the symbol of everything he hated. With Taft's money, Carl bought a small yacht called the Akista. That boat became his floating killing machine for the next few years. He sailed it to City Island in the Bronx and started hunting sailors in waterfront bars. His method was cold and calculated. He'd offer lone sailors jobs or drinks on his yacht, get them drunk, rape them, shoot them with Taft's stolen gun, and dump their bodies in Long Island Sound near Execution Rocks Light. He picked that spot on purpose. Its deadly rocks wrecked ships and would destroy any evidence. For 3 months, Carl killed systematically from City Island. He claimed 10 victims, though only some could be confirmed. Several sailors vanished after being seen with a guy matching his description. Their bodies never found. His yacht killings only stopped when the Akista ran aground and sank near Atlantic City in rough weather. His last 2 targets escaped in the chaos. If the boat hadn't gone down, Carl might have kept killing sailors forever. After the wreck, he was nabbed in Stamford, Connecticut, for burglary and carrying a loaded gun, serving 6 months in Bridgeport jail. But prison just fueled his urge to escalate. Out in 1921, he got into a shootout with Philly cops, made bail, and fled to Norfolk, Virginia, catching a ship to Portuguese Angola. What Carl did in Angola is some of the darkest stuff in serial killer history. As a foreman on an oil rig, he had access to remote areas and vulnerable locals. Bored, he burned the rig down out of spite. Then he started a campaign of rape and murder. He paid families for young girls, assaulted them, then demanded his money back. When they offered younger kids to appease him, he turned to murder. He confessed to raping and killing an 11 or 12-year-old Angolan boy. But that wasn't enough. He wrote about hiring 6 local men for a crocodile hunting trip, then shooting them all with a Luger pistol in a canoe and feeding their bodies to the crocs. He described it like it was nothing, noting the crocodiles took care of the evidence. When locals started investigating, Carl fled through the rainforest to the Belgian Congo, still committing crimes until he had to leave Africa. Back in the US in 1922, Carl got smarter about avoiding capture. In New York, he fitted a silencer to a pistol from Africa, planning to become a hitman. But when he tested it, the silencer wasn't quiet enough. He later wrote that if it had worked, he'd have gone into the murder business on a wholesale scale. Disappointed, he stuck to what he knew, targeting the defenseless. In July 1922, in Salem, Massachusetts, he abducted and beat a young boy to death with a rock. Later that year, near New Haven, he strangled another kid. He briefly worked as a night watchman in Yonkers, but got bored. In 1923, he went back to stealing yachts to hunt victims. In June, he stole to an Aero 1 from Dr. Charles Payne in Larchmont, which he crashed near New Rochelle, and another from New Rochelle's police chief, showing his growing disdain for cops. Using the chief's yacht, he lured a 15-year-old named George Wolassen, promising a job. Instead, he assaulted him for days, but Wolassen saw something worse. On June 27, 1923, near Kingston, New York, Carl shot a man he thought was trying to rob him with a .38 caliber pistol and dumped the body in the river. Wolassen witnessed it. The next day, at Poughkeepsie, while Carl was stealing fishing nets, Wolassen jumped overboard and swam to shore, reporting the assault and murder to Yonkers police. The manhunt for Captain John O'Leary led to Carl's arrest in Nyack on June 29, 1923. For the first time, he faced murder charges with a living witness. But Carl was sly. He convinced his lawyer to take a stolen boat for bail money, then skip town. The feds seized the boat, but Carl was gone. 2 months later, on August 26, 1923, he was caught breaking into a train depot in Larchmont. No bail this time. He got 5 years, served at Sing Sing, and then Clinton Prison in Dannemora. Even in max security, he couldn't stop. He tried escaping Clinton, got injured spine damage, broken ankles, and attacked a guard, adding assault charges. But prison gave him time to think. When he got out in July 1928, after nearly 5 years, he'd decided he wasn't done killing. He was going to get better at it. August 1928 was a blur of violence. On August 20th, he burglarized a dentist's home in Washington, D.C., stealing a radio and jewelry. But theft wasn't enough anymore. That month, he killed at least 3 more, a boy in Salem, another in Connecticut, and 14-year-old Alexander Oshaka, a newsboy in Philadelphia near the Delaware River. He forced Alexander to help steal from a yacht, then killed him and stuffed his body in a blanket with broken radio parts. The mix of murder and careless evidence disposal showed how little he valued his victims. When Carl was arrested on August 30th, 1928, he was done running. He gave his real name and confessed to multiple murders with details that stunned detectives. Asked why he killed kids, He said, "I hate the human race, and I get a kick out of murdering people." With his rap sheet and confessions to 21 murders, Carl got 25 years to life at Leavenworth, inmate number 31,614, back where his killer instincts were born 18 years earlier. He told the warden, "I'll kill the first guy who bothers me." They put him in the laundry room under Robert Warkey, a foreman known for bullying inmates. Despite Carl's warnings, Warkey kept at it. On June 20, 1929, Carl snapped, crushing Warkey's skull with an iron bar. His trial was quick. He was convicted and sentenced to hang. He refused appeals and told do-gooders, "I wish you all had one neck and my hands on it." On death row, he met Henry Lesser, a guard who showed him kindness, giving him money for cigarettes. Shocked, Carl took writing materials from Lesser and wrote his chilling autobiography. He started it with, "In my lifetime, I have murdered 21 human beings. I have committed thousands of burglaries, robberies, larcenies, arsons, and last but not least, I have committed sodomy on more than 1,000 male human beings. For all these things, I am not in the least bit sorry." On September 5, 1930, Carl walked to the gallows at Leavenworth. He spat in the executioner's face when they tried to hood him. His last words, "Hurry it up, you Hoosier bastard. I could kill a dozen men while you're screwing around." At 6:02 a.m., Carl Panzram was dead at 39, after spending over half his life locked up. His death didn't end his story. His autobiography, Saved by Lesser, was later published and studied by experts. Almost everything he wrote checked out, making it one of the most reliable serial killer confessions ever. Carl's legacy is pure destruction, but it's also a grim lesson in how abuse and brutality can shape a monster. His reform school and prison experiences don't justify his crimes, but show how a troubled kid became a prolific killer. The victims he left, sailors, kids, men fed to crocodiles, remind us why we need to catch violent behavior early. Carl died as he lived, angry, violent, unrepentant, demanding his execution be quick so he wouldn't waste another second on a world he despised. What do you make of Carl Panzram's case? Do his childhood horrors explain his crimes, or was he just born evil? Could he have been saved, or was he too far gone by his first murder? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this case gripped you like it did us, subscribe for more deep dives into America's worst criminals. Hit the notification bell to stay updated, like the video if it held your attention, and share it with anyone who loves solid true crime stories. Thanks for sticking with us, and we'll catch you in the next one.